You know, there's something most people completely misunderstand about giving and receiving. They assume that the more they give, the more they will receive in return. They're taught to give until it hurts, to sacrifice endlessly, to empty themselves for others as a kind of virtue. But what if this entire belief is the very thing keeping you locked in lack? My name is Abdullah, and for decades I taught a principle that even my most well-known student, Neville Goddard, struggled to truly grasp in the beginning. It is a principle that sounds almost irrational until you begin to understand the hidden mechanics of consciousness itself. Here is what I told Neville when he came to me desperate, lost, and broke. You cannot give what you do not have, and you cannot receive what you refuse to become. Most people are attempting to give from a state of poverty, and poverty consciousness, no matter how much it hands out, can only reproduce more poverty. But here is the truth that changes everything. When you genuinely understand how giving and receiving function through the law of consciousness, you begin to see they are not two separate actions. They are one continuous movement, and those who truly grasp this become channels through which infinite abundance naturally flows. But first, you must do something that most people avoid completely, something that exposes the real reason your giving has created lack instead of abundance. Let me take you back to 1931, when a desperate young dancer walked into my lecture hall on West 72nd Street in New York. His name was Neville Goddard. He had heard about this Ethiopian mystic who taught ancient truths. He was unemployed, struggling deeply, and like most people, he believed the answer to his problems was some technique or secret formula. But before I would teach him anything about manifesting wealth or success, I told him something that completely surprised him. "Neville," I said, "you must begin with self. Find self. Do not be ashamed of the being you are. Discover it and begin changing that self." You see, Neville thought he knew who he was, but he did not. None of us truly do until we are willing to look deeply. And what I saw when I looked at him was a young man who was afraid to receive, who believed he was not worthy, who felt that poverty was somehow more spiritual than abundance. He was giving, yes, he was kind and generous, but he was giving from a closed hand and a fearful heart. And here is what I taught him that day, what I am sharing with you now. If you are afraid to give, it is a clear sign that your consciousness of God is very small, that you believe you have taken all that you can possibly get, and now you are afraid to release it. But if you understand that you are a medium, a channel through which all good flows from the infinite to man, then you will know that as long as the channel remains open, there is always more than enough substance to flow through it. The problem is not giving or receiving. The real problem is the consciousness from which you are trying to do either. And that consciousness must change, not through force, not through rigid technique, but through deep understanding of what I call the laws of conscious circulation. The first law is this: the closed hand creates poverty. Let me tell you something that may sound like a contradiction. The people who give the most often receive the least, not because giving itself does not work, but because they are giving from the wrong state of awareness. Imagine someone who gives constantly, money they cannot afford to give, time they do not truly have, energy they cannot replenish. They exhaust themselves helping everyone around them, yet they remain stuck, broke, drained, and quietly resentful. When someone like this asks why they are always in lack despite their generosity, I ask them one simple question: when you give, do you feel fear? And almost every time the answer becomes clear. Every time they give money, there is a thought, now I will not have enough. Every time they help someone, there is a worry about their own unmet needs. There it is. They are giving from fear, from a mindset that believes there is never enough, that they must sacrifice themselves to be good, that receiving is somehow selfish. And here is the truth. The closed mind can receive no more than the closed hand. If your mind is shut, holding tightly to what little it thinks it has, it cannot grow and it cannot multiply. Yes, you must give to have, but you must give from a state of abundance, not from a state of lack. The old idea of sacrifice has been misunderstood. True giving is not loss. What you offer is what returns multiplied. But there is a deeper law behind this. When a person gives from fear, afraid the well will run dry, they are affirming lack. And consciousness always creates after its own nature. Their giving does not open the flow. It reinforces scarcity. But when a person gives from fullness, knowing they are a channel for infinite supply, their giving becomes a declaration of abundance, and reality must align with that declaration. This is why Neville later said that assumption hardens into fact. Whatever state you give from, you are assuming, and that assumption shapes your reality. The second law is this: you cannot give what you do not have. Here is where most teachings go dangerously wrong. They tell you to give even in lack, to sacrifice as proof of faith. But I taught Neville something different. You cannot give what you do not possess in consciousness. You may hand over money you cannot afford. You may exhaust yourself for others. You may play the role of the martyr. But you cannot give wealth if you live in poverty consciousness. You cannot give peace if you are anxious. You cannot give love if you feel empty inside. What you give is not the object. What you give is the state of consciousness behind it. And if that state is lack, then lack is what you are spreading, multiplying, and receiving back. Think of someone taught that spirituality means giving everything away. They empty themselves, give their savings, their time, their energy, until they are bitter and drained. The problem is not their generosity. The problem is the consciousness behind it. They are giving from guilt, from obligation, from a need to prove worthiness. They are trying to earn love through sacrifice. But the truth is this: to give health, you must first embody health. To give wealth, you must first assume wealth. To give love, you must first be love. This is not selfishness. This is divine law. You must become whole before you can give wholeness. You cannot offer abundance while believing in scarcity. When someone truly understands this, everything shifts. They stop compulsive giving. They turn inward and begin to find self. They examine their beliefs without judgment. And they begin to see that they were giving to prove something, to hide their own sense of lack. Once they see this clearly, they begin to assume abundance first. They live in the end of prosperity. They occupy the state of the person who already has. And from that state, giving becomes natural, joyful, effortless. And for the first time, receiving feels just as natural. Now let me continue with what happens when you truly understand the nature of conscious circulation. The third law is this: the channel must remain open. Here is the secret most people never realize. You are not the source. You are the channel. And a channel does not hold. It flows. When Neville first came to me, he was trying to be the source. He was trying to create wealth through effort, forcing outcomes, relying on willpower and techniques. But I taught him something essential. There is nothing that can separate you from the source of all good. What you give is not yours, but flows through you. Think of a pipe. When water flows through it, it is never empty. But if the pipe tries to hold the water, it becomes blocked. The flow stops. This is exactly what happens when you give from fear or hold from fear. You stop being a channel and try to become a container, and containers eventually run dry. But channels flow endlessly. I taught Neville something that completely reshaped his understanding of giving and receiving. Fear not. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. The kingdom is within you, and you can claim it by entering into a conscious partnership with the infinite. When you truly grasp this, giving and receiving are no longer separate actions. They become one continuous movement. You are not giving your own limited resources. You are allowing infinite supply to move through you. You are not receiving from the outer world. You are receiving from consciousness itself, and consciousness is without limit. Consider someone who offers a service, perhaps healing, teaching, or counseling. If they constantly worry, if I give too much time here, I won't have enough left for others, or if I charge too little, I won't have enough for myself, their work begins to suffer. People sense the tension. Money flows unevenly. They exhaust themselves trying to sustain it all. But the moment they shift their awareness and realize, I am not the healer, I am the channel through which healing flows, everything begins to change. As long as they remain open, the supply is endless. Their work expands. Their energy increases. Clients experience deeper results. Money flows more naturally because they stopped trying to be the source and accepted their role as the channel. The fourth law is this: giving reveals your consciousness. This is where truth becomes undeniable. Simply observe how you give. Your giving will expose your state. If you give with resentment, you are operating from poverty consciousness. If you give with fear, you believe there is not enough. If you give with a sense of superiority, you are trying to validate your worth. If you give out of obligation, you are living in bondage. But when you give from wholeness, from overflow, from a genuine sense of abundance, the act becomes effortless, natural, and even joyful. I explained this to Neville, and at first he struggled deeply. He wanted to appear generous even when fear was present. He wanted to look abundant even while feeling lack within. But I told him, do not be ashamed of the being you are. Discover it. Begin with self. This is what I call uncritical observation of self, not judgment, not condemnation, just honest awareness of the consciousness you are operating from. When Neville truly examined his giving, he discovered something unsettling. He was giving to others in the hope they would return the favor. He helped people expecting help in return. He acted kindly, hoping kindness would come back. That is not true giving. That is bargaining, subtle manipulation driven by lack. And because consciousness creates reality, he experienced people who took from him without returning, people who used him and left him disappointed. Why? Because his giving was affirming, I do not have enough. I need something from you. And reality reflected that state perfectly. I taught him the deeper truth. In order to have, you must give, but you must give from having, not from needing. Pour out your love freely to anyone who asks, and it will return multiplied. This has never failed. But the giving must come from fullness, not from emptiness seeking to be filled. Every time I demonstrate this law for another, I become more certain of its truth, and I grow stronger in it. When I give health through true understanding, I receive an even greater sense of health in return. This is the law. You receive what you give, multiplied. Not the object, but the consciousness behind it. The fifth law concerns receiving, and this is where most people unknowingly block themselves. They pray for wealth but feel unworthy of it. They desire abundance but carry guilt around receiving. They want prosperity yet believe struggle is more spiritual. And so, they remain in lack, regardless of how much they give or how hard they try. I told Neville, never be ashamed of who you are. Discover yourself and begin transforming that self, because shame blocks receiving. Feelings of unworthiness block receiving. Guilt closes the door. You cannot receive what you believe you do not deserve. You cannot accept abundance while assuming you are meant for limitation. This is why assumption is everything. Let me share one of the most important lessons I ever gave Neville about receiving. In 1933, during the Great Depression, when millions were unemployed, Neville's brother sent him money and arranged passage home to Barbados with first-class accommodations. But when Neville went to the steamship office, they told him he would have to travel third class, though he could use first-class areas during the day. Neville returned and told me the situation. I asked him, Who told you that you are going third class? You are already in Barbados, and you went first class. Then I closed the door. It seemed harsh, but I was teaching him something essential. You must assume worthiness before reality can reflect it. If he accepted third class in his mind, that is what he would experience. But if he assumed first class, reality would adjust. On the morning of departure, the ticket agent told him there had been a cancellation, and now he could travel first class. This is the power of assuming worthiness. It is your Father's joy to give you the kingdom. You are a joint heir. You claim it not with arrogance, but with quiet authority, the authority that comes from knowing who you are. Neville learned this lesson so deeply that later, when he was drafted into the army and desired an honorable discharge, he did not plead or struggle. He simply assumed he was already home as a civilian. He lay down in his barracks and imagined himself in his own bed in New York City, not temporarily, but permanently free. He walked through his home in imagination, touching objects, feeling it real. At 4 a.m, he experienced a vision. A paper appeared with the word "disapproved," signed by his colonel. Then another hand crossed it out and wrote "approved" in bold script. A voice declared that which I have done is done. Do nothing. 9 days later, the same colonel who denied him reversed the decision and granted his discharge. This is what happens when you assume worthiness and live from the end. The 6th law is the law of multiplied return. The thing you offer is the thing you receive multiplied. But most misunderstand this. They think if they give money, they will receive more money. Sometimes that happens, but more often they give from fear and receive multiplied fear, multiplied lack. Because the law does not multiply the object. It multiplies the consciousness behind it. If you give from abundance, you receive abundance multiplied. If you give from scarcity, you receive scarcity multiplied. The law is exact, mechanical, and unfailing. Every time I demonstrate truth for another, I receive more truth within myself, not because of repayment, but because I gave from a state aligned with truth. This is what I taught Neville to practice. Before giving anything, pause and examine your state. Are you giving from fear? Then do not proceed. Shift your awareness first. Are you giving from obligation? Then stop and return to a sense of fullness. But if you are giving from abundance, then give freely, knowing the return is already secured. This is not manipulation. It is alignment with universal law. I once had a student who believed that because of what he called the accident of his birth, he was permanently denied opportunity. He was convinced the world was structured against him, that he was a second-class individual. I told him plainly, there is no cause outside of your own mind. You must begin with self. Find self. Do not be ashamed. Discover it and begin changing it. It took him nearly 3 years to dissolve that belief. 3 years of consistent inner work to move from limitation to prosperity consciousness. But he remained persistent, and the results were remarkable. That same man later brought Neville to see his office on Wilshire Boulevard, a beautiful and successful space, fully equipped and thriving. And he showed Neville his annual net income, nearly $250,000 each year. Not because the outer conditions suddenly shifted, but because his consciousness transformed. That was the real change. The 7th law is becoming the channel of infinite supply. Now we arrive at the final and most essential principle. The aim is not simply to give more or to receive more. The aim is to become a channel through which infinite supply flows easily and naturally. Not a container trying to store and hold. Not a martyr trying to sacrifice everything, but a clear channel through which abundance moves from the infinite source to anyone who needs it. I taught Neville that when you truly study and realize there is nothing that can separate you from the source of all good, you come to understand that what you give is not yours, but the Father's. This realization changes everything. You are not giving your own limited money. You are allowing the infinite to give through you. You are not receiving from people. You are receiving directly from consciousness itself. You are not managing limited resources. You are channeling an unlimited flow. And here is what begins to happen when you genuinely become this channel. Giving becomes effortless. You give because it feels natural, not because you feel obligated. Receiving becomes just as natural. You accept abundance without guilt because you recognize your worthiness. Fear fades away because you are no longer depending on people or circumstances. You are relying on the infinite source. Gratitude replaces anxiety because you begin to notice the abundance that has always been flowing through your life. When you know that you are a medium, a channel through which all good flows, you understand that as long as the channel stays open, there is always more than enough to move through it. This is the state you are being invited into. Not more effort in giving, not more struggle in receiving, but becoming the open channel through which infinite abundance flows with ease. So here you are, with 7 laws that completely reverse what you may have been taught about giving and receiving. The closed hand creates poverty because consciousness always reproduces its own nature. You cannot give what you do not have because what you truly give is consciousness, not objects. The channel must remain open because you are not the source, you are the medium. Giving reveals your state of consciousness, showing clearly whether you are operating from lack or abundance. Receiving requires a sense of worthiness because you cannot accept what you believe you do not deserve. The law of multiplied return expands the consciousness you give from, not the physical thing itself. And becoming the channel means living as the medium through which infinite supply flows naturally and continuously. When these principles settle into your awareness, something remarkable begins to take place. You release anxiety around money. You let go of resentment tied to giving. You drop the guilt associated with receiving. You become what I guided Neville to become, a conscious channel through which abundance moves freely in both directions. And this is how it begins to show up in everyday life. Someone asks for help, and you offer it, not from pressure or fear, but from genuine overflow. You do not worry about whether you will have enough time or energy. You know the source is infinite. Money comes into your life and you receive it with ease, without guilt or hesitation. You understand that it is your natural right. An opportunity appears, and instead of seeing it as something difficult to achieve, you recognize it as the natural expression of your abundance consciousness. You step into the state of already having it, and reality begins to align with that assumption. This is what it means to enter into co-partnership with the infinite, to claim your birthright, to step forward with authority. Not arrogance, not denial of reality, but a calm and steady knowing of who you are. You are worthy. You are the channel. Abundance is your natural condition, and when you live from this state, the world must reflect it back to you. People begin to respond differently. Opportunities appear that were always present but invisible to your former awareness. Resources begin to flow through channels you never could have predicted. Not because you are forcing reality, but because you are aligned with the law itself. This is what Neville discovered through these teachings. This is what he later shared with others throughout his life. And this is what is being shared with you now. Find self. Become aware of the consciousness you are currently living from without judgment or shame. Transform that self. Assume the awareness of the abundant channel. Occupy that state fully. Live from that awareness. Give from overflow. Receive with a sense of worthiness. Be the medium through which infinite supply moves, and observe how your entire reality reshapes itself to reflect this new state. Because consciousness is the only true reality, and it always creates after its own nature, consistently and perfectly. If what has been shared resonates deeply within you, if you recognize the truth in these ideas, then take action now. In the comments below, write reset. This is more than just a word. It is a declaration. It is a conscious decision to move from poverty awareness into abundance awareness, from a closed hand into an open channel. When you write reset, you will receive the Manifest Reset, 5 practical shifts designed to guide you through this transformation. These are the same ideas I taught Neville, simplified into clear and usable steps. Reset number 1 shows you how to stop forcing emotions and begin naturally assuming abundance. Reset number 2 reveals how to move from seeking into having. Reset number 3, which has helped more people than any other, teaches you how to release without giving up, how to become the channel instead of the container. These are not complex techniques. They are shifts in awareness, and awareness is everything. So write reset now. Declare your intention. Claim your birthright as a channel of infinite abundance. And there is something more you should understand. Everything shared here about giving and receiving is only one part of a much greater truth. A truth about consciousness that Neville studied with me for years. A truth that transformed him from a struggling, unemployed dancer into one of the most influential teachers of his time. I taught him something about wealth consciousness that goes far beyond giving and receiving. A deeper understanding about the vibration of abundance that most people never come to know. A method that enabled his students to attract money even in situations that seemed impossible. This teaching is known as the wealth secret that was revealed to Neville Goddard, a truth that many people will never fully understand. It expands everything you have learned here into a complete system of consciousness. It shows you not only how to give and receive, but how to become abundance itself, how to embody prosperity so fully that reality has no choice but to align with it. This is the missing piece, the completion of everything that has been shared. The next step is already in front of you. Watch it and discover what it truly means to live as abundance itself, to broadcast prosperity so clearly that the world reflects it back without resistance.